welcome back to Reverse Shot, where we take a look at the best and the worst of the news. Okay, it's bad. Well, not as bad as a Donald Trump political appointee, but what was that? Well, you get the point. Anyway, we've had a few problems in the press this week, but let's start with the good news. This week, the satirical website The Onion announced that it purchased at auction Alex Jones's Infowars with the blessing of the families of the victims of the mass shooting at Shady Hook Elementary School, and they planned to reintroduce Infowars as a parody of itself, mocking weird internet personalities like Jones who trafficked in misinformation. Leave it to satire to bring us actual news. Anyway, Alex Jones took to the former Twitter and lied, saying it was all a hoax and there was no auction.
All right, I shot a special report on this that I posted at Real Alex Jones about 2 hours ago. And then I was actually reading the transcripts from the multi-hour emergency court hearing today in federal bankruptcy court in Houston. And then I called all the lawyers and talked to them, and they had a total consensus. They've never seen anything like it. The words were exactly, this was a private secret sale, basically illegal is the word that's used. Basically, it's crime. I mean, bankruptcy crime, on its face. Disguised as an auction that wasn't an auction. And the people didn't even pay real money. They paid some weird fiat thing that wasn't even agreed to by the judge's order. And then they had the corporate media say that The Onion bought Infowars. And then the judge kept saying to the trustee that did this, I didn't give you the authority to do this. You were supposed to come to me about an auction. This isn't even an auction. And then it's just all over the news that they just bought it and they won the bid and they did that. But then they quote the U.S. trustee going, well, it's not the highest bid, but it's the best bid. These people just, they can do anything. It's crazy. So nobody sees how the federal judge, who's known for being straight-laced and not corrupt at all, Judge Chris Lopez, cannot end this fake sale, which he basically said didn't happen. He's having an emergency evidentiary hearing sometime next week. He hasn't announced the date yet. And bare minimum, there'll be a new open public auction. Probably more is going to happen. This is unprecedented, folks. Just like the last trustee he fired back on June 14th tried to close the building without a court order. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes deep state goings on here, and this is a big deal. I've been up since 5 a.m. dealing with this. I'm about to go to sleep. I'll be covering all live from the new studios of the Alex Jones Network at AJN Live on X. Please follow me there. But this is going to be big. Everybody out there thinking Infowars was shut down, you're in for a rude awakening.
So what really happened? Well, the lawyers for The Onion said the deal was secure, but the U.S. bankruptcy court in Houston put the sale on hold until a hearing next week. Here's to The Onion. I hope they're successful. It would be a fitting end and a beginning to Infowars. Meanwhile, liars keep lying, folks. That's right, we're talking about Donald Trump. He is one pissed-off, pulsing mass of flatulating ganglia. Friday morning, it is reported he is suing the New York Times, CBS News, and other media outlets, including the Daily Beast. The Guardian, which reported this story, led with describing Trump as a convicted felon. That's sure to cheer him up, as Trump described the news media as the enemy camp in his victory speech. Trump specifically is upset with a CBS interview with Kamala Harris, saying that CBS edited it to make her look good. He's pissed at the New York Times for a variety of articles, including one with a headline that read, quote, "For Trump, a lifetime of scandals heads toward a moment of judgment." He's also upset that Times ran an article about him that said he would rule like a dictator. Never mind, he's used that term himself. These are frivolous charges, according to First Amendment attorneys, part of an act to intimidate the press when we actually manage to cover Trump the way he doesn't want you to. Honestly. Talk about your sore winners. Anyway, meanwhile, Donald Trump has been making the rounds with nominations for his new administration that makes a weekend with Beetlejuice look sane.
What are your qualifications?
Well, I attended Juilliard.
I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it. Not to mention the fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think? You think I'm qualified?
Chuck Todd, of all people, jumped in with a tweet saying, these confirmation hearings on the appointments may just save cable TV for the short term. Hey, Chuck, you know what? Reporting of vetted facts without opinions could save it in the long term. Just an opinion. Oh, right, I forgot. It's all about the entertainment. Then, of course, there's Jeff Toobin, the political commentator for CNN, who once got caught exposing his shortcomings on a video conference call. Trump appointed both Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk to head up an advisory board that will look at government efficiency. Now, for the moment, we're going to lay aside the fact that he appointed two people to head up an advisory board on efficiency. Instead, let's hear what Toobin had to say.
First of all, it's basically, it seems like it'll be part of the White House staff, which is fine. I mean, the president is allowed to hire whoever he wants. It's not a government department, as you said. However, there is a very boring and very important law called the Administrative Procedures Act, which governs how the government moves along in terms of changing how it works. And it requires a lot of hoops to be jumped through. If you want to get rid of part of a government department, if you want to change the structure of the Department of Education, the Department of the Interior, you have to go through all these steps. And like it or not, these two entrepreneurs are going to have to start learning that and following it, and it's going to drive them crazy. And we'll see how much they actually do. There have been lots of attempts to make the government more efficient. Al Gore did it. There was something called the Grace Report back in the Reagan administration. It's a lot harder than it seems.
So according to Toobin, they'll get bored, they'll walk away because the red tape will be too much and government won't change. Nothing to worry about here, folks. Well, first of all, it's hard to take a guy seriously who, again, exposed his shortcomings on a televised conference call. And honestly, I would fire someone for handling this situation in such a manner in front of a group of his colleagues. But that aside, look, man, this is complete crap. Everyone forgets the most important fact in this, and we don't report it well, and it's one of the biggest shortcomings in reporting what's going to happen in the next 4 years. The Supreme Court said the president has unlimited immunity for actions they deem official. So you know what's going to happen? Ramaswamy and Musk could go back to the boss and say, hey, boss, you know, we've taken a look at efficiency. You need to cut this, that, and the other thing out of government. Then Trump will take the action as an official action. He could just issue an edict. Sure, it'll end up in court, but the Supreme Court, who would ultimately decide, they back Donald Trump. So come on, quit telling me your opinion if you don't know the facts. Get the facts straight. The biggest challenge we have going forward, the news media refuses to acknowledge that Donald Trump has been made a king. Sorry. How do you think this is going to turn out? Think. Meanwhile, Reporters Without Borders is suing Elon Musk and X, accusing it of spreading misinformation. Now, a reminder, Musk is in Trump's hip pocket, and he routinely claims that X is the new news media king. De facto state news. Yeah, but no one is happier about Musk and Ramaswamy being involved in the government than Fox's Jesse Waters. Giddy as a puppy in heat. Waters wants Musk to run for president.
I love those two, and I like them together. Musk and Vivek. Just perfect. And I think Musk might be running for president. I'm going to put it out there.
Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson.
Where was he born?
South Africa.
Oh, he can't?
Hello, Jesse.
Ah, man. I'm predicting he's not running for president.
I find it hilarious that Waters is so stupid that he doesn't realize that Elon Musk can't be president, at least until Donald Trump issues an edict that says, you know, something else. Anyway, I really think it's a sycophantic attitude that Waters brings to the news business that is funny as hell. You need further proof? Well, here he is comparing Donald Trump's latest nominations to the goddamn dream team. doesn't get any better than this. I mean, well, if you're talking stupid.
When they assemble Magic, Mike, and Larry into one team, and no one's ever thought about that before. And now this is what you're looking at. You're looking at the dream team. They're assembling a constellation of stars, which I happen to know intimately. And I've never been this excited before. I am so excited for this country, not for me personally, although that's there. I'm just so excited for the change that we're going to see in the next 4 years.
That brings us to this week's interview with William Cooper. He's the author of How America Works and Why It Doesn't. And we're going to take a listen and look as he tells us his views on social media. With me now is William Cooper. He's an attorney, national columnist, award-winning author, and the author of How America Works and Why It Doesn't. And so he's here to join us, and well, I thank you for coming back to the show. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the problems of the press and what we're doing right and wrong. But mostly, let's take a look at it regarding how the press worked with this election. Helen Thomas said that we were the watchdogs of democracy. I think we failed our job. You?
Yeah, I agree. The democracy is not being protected very well right now. I think it's interesting combination of, in some ways, the press failing to do its job fully. And then in another respect, people did know an awful lot about Donald Trump, who he is, what he's done, what he did in office last time, and all the ways that he has violated our essential principles. It was all laid before the country in a lot of ways, and yet they nonetheless affirmed and endorsed him. So I think it's a complicated mixture.
So let's talk about let's talk about the press part of it. And it's not just having to do with Trump, but also in how we conduct ourselves on a daily basis. Those on the right and on the left believe that we no longer do our job correctly. And for reasons that I having been in the business for 40 years, I disagree with. I don't think they understand the problems, but I do think they have identified a problem. And so the problems with the press, and when we spoke last time, you spoke a little bit about that. What are we doing wrong? What do we need to do better? And what are we doing right?
I think there's still a lot of very good journalists out there. So I'll start with what the press is doing right. You're one of them, and a number of others are out there doing really good work. And a lot of journalists are still acting like traditional journalists, doing the job they've always done, and Helen Thomas would be proud. But there's a big ecosystem now, and a lot of journalists aren't doing it. They're throwing flames. They're adding to the partisan fuels that we see every day, from Washington out throughout the country. And then we also have this mixture of big corporate interests that have a lot of undue power, combined with this fragmented echo chamber of lots of people who, are able to gain traction without that corporate backing. So it's a big mix of, in a lot of ways, dysfunction, even though there are still really good journalists out there.
Well, individual journalists aside, what you've talked about, corporate media is one of the huge things. They say we're, the liberal media, and I always say, look, that doesn't exist. We're corporate media, and we're going to go where the money sends us. So if I can sell you, hot dogs by playing to your prejudice on the left, I'll do it. If I can sell you hot dogs playing to your prejudices on the right, I'll do it. It's an information silo that we just are the ping pong balls going back and forth. Less information and more entertainment. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, the if it bleeds, it leads has been around for a long time. That concept, but now there's all these different ways to do it. There's all these different tools, and there's social media and online and the networks, and you've got cable news. So I absolutely agree. I mean, it is a business. And an unfortunately small percentage of journalism is out there really just trying to put out high quality work. Most of it, I do agree, is all about generating interest, excitement, which doesn't correspond with sobriety and rationality, and trying to make money.
So how do you fix it? What would be your suggestion to the media? If you had media executives in a room, said, fellas, you've put profits over information. Oh, this is what you got to do.
A very hard problem, very difficult to fix. I would support just injecting more moderate voices into the equation. There's this fallacy that if you get somebody on the left screaming and hollering, someone on the right screaming and hollering, you've presented both sides, and there's some sort of fair way to assess what's actually happening, kind of meet in the middle. I don't think that's right. I think you combine those two, and you're just off the rails in two different directions. So trying to champion more sober voices who are actually out there trying to report the facts, trying to assess the facts is really important. The only other area that I would add to that list really high up is local newspapers, local journalism.
Yes.
It is truly tragic that this country no longer has a robust ecosystem. You used to go to any city, mid-sized city, big city, any city in the country, and you find the preeminent newspaper there. It was big and thick. The Sunday paper would unroll it and ads and content all over the place. I know you, Brian, you've won awards for local reporting. That now they're either fully extinct, just online, or they're tiny little shell of their former self. I think that causes huge problems locally, where a lot of harm can be done, a lot of government abuse can take place, but also nationally as well. And it just, the country really misses that bulwark. It's just so emaciated compared to where it was 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And when I first got into the business, it was a robust, it's estimated 45% of the counties in the United States, that's nearly half of the counties in the United States, and I can't speak to the area, but how much area of the U.S., but 45% of the counties don't have a local news presence. So how do you
report? The fourth estate of government.
Yeah. How do you report?
It's gone.
How do you find out what's going on in your city council? Hell, in your local, you used to be able to see local high school basketball, baseball, football games. The PTA, all of this was covered locally. That down the street you would have the oh gosh, we really need a stoplight there. Let's go into city council and talk to them. But nobody's covering any of that, and much less state legislatures. So
yeah, it's really unfortunate, and it goes back to your point about making money. Because of the internet and Facebook and the online options, they were no longer money makers. So the money's gone to other places. So I think if we can get more people going in nonprofit scenarios, philanthropy, we have some of that, some papers, but I think we need more of that. People just recognize how incredibly vital this is to our democracy. And it's I don't think it's a coincidence that the downfall of the local paper, which you think of a local paper as a small paper, but the cumulative impact of all the local papers was a juggernaut. And the fact that we've lost that in our democracy, it's not a coincidence that's corresponded with some of the degeneration we've seen in government.
Or some of the degenerates we've seen in government. Did I go there? Yes, I think I did.
Yeah.
But you're
well played.
That is a very well placed point. And I often point to the rise of Mitch McConnell coincided with the downfall of the Courier-Journal and Louisville Times, where I worked. They vetted, they would endorse candidates on the right and on the left. But to get endorsed, you had to go in, do an interview, get vetted by the editorial staff. They did opposition research on you, and then they issued their opinions. Now, you may have hated the Courier, but you love their endorsement, and most candidates would include that endorsement in their advertising because 90% of the people that the paper endorsed got elected. They cease to be. They sell out to Gannett, and here we have the rise of Mitch McConnell. So I think you've made an excellent point. And it's not, look, it's the Courier. Take a look at the Des Moines Register. You can look at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Kansas City Star. All across the country, as these entities have been bought out by a larger corporation, their newsrooms have shrunk. And they're no longer able to do the work that builds communities. We're just tearing each other apart. So,
Absolutely.
So if you recommend more nonprofit, how would you approach politicians? Because as your book says, How America Works and Why It Doesn't, You outlined some of the bigger problems that we have in politics. So how do you get the ear of politicians with something so vital? Believe me, I'm not asking just for mild interest or unassociated interest. I want to do it. I want to know how to do it.
I think it all works together. I mean, politicians have less incentive now to listen to reporters, to listen to people from the local papers, because there's just not as much at stake. You talked about your paper, you got their endorsement, you were going to win. Now, local endorsements really mean a lot less. I mean, we just saw Jeff Bezos say, right or wrong, but almost verbatim, the Washington Post endorsement doesn't mean anything, period. And that was why he
both arrogant and at the same time indicative of how little he thinks of his own newspaper. But
and of course, all circles back to your really good point, Brian, of the profit motive. I mean, I think it's safe to say Jeff Bezos likes profits, and I think he wants his newspaper to become more profitable than it has been. So it's all related.
I don't know how you can be the thing that just staggers my mind is we're watching newspapers fall. And look, I maintain that the government has helped kill them. I don't think people have ceased wanting to read. And you can be, if you're a newspaper, you can print, you can be online, you can be you've got to be on all platforms. But you still have, as I say, if you go into a court of law, and I hold up a newspaper that was printed, 20 years ago and say, here, bing, bang, bong. There's what was said. Man, it's finite. It has been hacked. Can't be changed. That's what happened. But I can go in on the internet and hack and change everything. So in a court of law, the newspaper still is king, the written word. And we've gotten rid of that. And
the standard.
Yeah.
The standard. Online, whether it's a website or just somebody's Substack or newsfeed, there's a lot of good individual contributors, but there's a lot of people that just are out there saying things without even checking or purposefully trying to, spread misinformation. Whereas the newspapers have, even the small ones today, they have rigorous standards that are really important. I'm sure you saw that, and that's very important. The raw elements of the media ecosystem have been degraded.
So let me ask you this. One of the things that I have found is that online, the disinformation and misinformation, in fact, libelous and slanderous material is populating the social media world because at the end of the day, it's from anonymous handles, like Big Tony 2 or with a fake picture or I am God 3 or whatever. So they're not personally responsible for what goes on. Whereas if they had to register and be you and me, I'm on Facebook, I'm on everything. It's me, Brian J. Karem. That's me, at Brian Karem. I don't hide behind, Big Tony 3 or I love the Packers 4 or whatever. I'm me. If everyone were responsible for what they had to say, I think it would get rid of a lot of it, but it would also get rid of the bots, and I don't think that the purveyors of social media would enjoy that.
That's a great point. Hiding behind anonymity is, that does not breed good outcomes. And yes, there's lots of bots. It's really a cesspool. You know this as a columnist. If you write something controversial and it gets a little traction on Twitter, the comments feed is just, you read that and it's just half of them aren't even people saying it. When it is people, some of it's funny, but that low discourse. Look, free speech is important, high and low. I'm not trying to squash it, but it doesn't help our politics to have that sort of discourse. And a lot of it is people just hiding behind the fact that nobody knows who they are.
Yeah, and free speech also has to be responsible speech because libel and slander is not protected by the First Amendment. You can't go into a crowded theater and yell fire when there isn't one, and they want to support the idea of doing all that. I can say whatever I want, and that's not the way it works, Elon. But anyway, that's my thought on. Well, look, I really appreciate you being here. It's an important conversation, and I want everybody to pick up the book, How America Works and Why It Doesn't. Well, is anything else you want to plug before we take off?
No, just thanks for having me. I think you've got a great show, and focusing on the media is really important. It's only going to be more important that we get this essential part of our democracy right over the next 4 years. The trend lines have been moving in the wrong direction. We really need to try to reverse those. And I think a big part of it is the good journalists doing good journalism. So I appreciate you doing that.
Well, as long as they'll have us, we'll be here. But I doubt if I'll be back in the White House, they probably won't give me a press pass. Anyway, I want to thank you, Will, and we will catch you next time. Well, that's it for this week's edition of Reverse Shot. It's been a long week. Can't wait for next week. Have fun, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and stick around. Folks, this is going to be a long ride.